What happens when you've already lost everything? Sirae had lived her whole life as an Omega. Bottom of the hierarchy, the pack's favorite target, the girl everyone pretended not to see until they needed someone to step on. And now her fated mate had chosen to humiliate her in front of the entire pack. With her bond shattered and her heart scraped raw, she ran, choosing the certainty of death in a raging blizzard over one more hour of being their shameful punchline. But out in that frozen wilderness, buried beneath the screaming wind, she heard a howl so full of agony it didn't sound human. She followed it and found a massive white wolf pinned beneath ice and dying. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know he was a king. She had no idea that saving him would tear her world apart and rebuild it into something unrecognizable. The air inside the Blood Moon Ridge Pack Hall was thick pine smoke, roasted meat bodies, packed shoulder to shoulder. Sirae Vance could practically taste the tension on her tongue. Tonight was the Rejection Ceremony. Brutal, yes, but tradition said it had to be done. Fated mates who didn't fit could cut the bond before it became permanent. And Sirae and Omega knew exactly what incompatible meant. It meant her. She stood near the back, small enough to disappear into the shadows, fingers clenched hard enough that her knuckles went bone white. At 18, she was the definition of Omega quiet, nurturing, powerless. Her wolf barely whispered, a pale gray flicker, trapped among dominant beasts who didn't hear her unless they wanted to. Her whole life had been an exercise in vanishing. A wish whispered every morning, "Don't look at me, don't hear me." But tonight, Lyroon had shoved her right under the spotlight. And now Rathor's voice boomed through the hall, snapping every head to attention. My future beta Voren. Sirae's heart didn't just sink. It dove into a bottomless pit. No, goddess, no. Voren stepped into the center, every inch the golden boy of the pack, tall, broad, charming, arrogant in a way the crowd adored. He was the sun. She was the dust mote floating in his light, about to be burned away. His scent, sandalwood, and that sharp bite of winter flooded her senses. The fated bond, faint as it was for her, flared, painfully clinging to him like a desperate last hope. His eyes swept the room, then locked on her with icy, deliberate precision. A smirk curled his lips. Sirae Vance. Step forward. A wave of gasps followed by snickers. Blood drained from her face. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He wasn't supposed to drag her out like this. She moved toward him, the crowd of nearly 200 wolves parting as if she carried a disease. She stopped about 10 feet away, head bowed, her light brown hair falling like a curtain to hide her shame. Voren, she whispered, voice trembling. The bond begged her to submit, to go to him, to cling. Look at me, Omega. She forced herself to raise her head. His face was beautiful, but his eyes were cold voids. I, Voren Thorn, he began, voice echoing off the stone walls, future beta of the Blood Moon Ridge Pack, call upon Lyroon as my witness. Sirae squeezed her eyes shut. Please, just get it over with. I declare my fated mate Sirae Vance to be lacking. Cruel laughter rippled around the hall. Sirae's knees wobbled, but she refused to fall. She is weak. She is small. She is Omega in title and in spirit. She will never bear strong sons or bring honor to my name or my pack. He turned toward Rathor, then the crowd soaking up their attention. This pack deserves strength, and I deserve a partner who matches me, not someone who serves me. Then he faced her again for the final blow. I, Voren Thorn, reject you, Sirae Vance. The words slammed into her like a blade to the chest. A searing agony tore through her heart, ripping through every nerve as the fated bond violently broke. She screamed a thin, wounded sound and dropped to her knees, clutching her chest. But he didn't stop. Voren walked past her crumpled form and stopped before the Alpha's daughter. Ellis, he said softly, taking her hand. I choose you. I choose strength. The hall erupted into cheers. Rathor nodded his approval, pride glowing in his eyes. Her betrayal was complete. They were celebrating her ruin. Through the haze of pain, Sirae lifted her head. No one looked at her. They toasted Voren, congratulated Elise. She was invisible again, only now she was invisible and broken. The pain in her chest faded into a hollow echo. The bond was gone. So was her future. Then with a violent crash, one of the great hall doors blew open. A blast of freezing wind and swirling snow flooded in. The frostwind blizzard whispered about by the elders had arrived. No one stepped forward to shut the door. They were all too busy cheering. Sirae stared at the gaping doorway. The wind was calling to her. Out there waited a fast death. In here lingered a slow one. She pushed herself upright, legs trembling beneath her. Her wolf, a silent curl of fear, tucked deep in her mind. One step, then another. No one noticed. The rejected Omega, the pack's favorite target, was slipping away. She crossed the threshold, leaving the heat and laughter behind, and stepped straight into the raging core of the storm. Snow slashed across her face like 1,000 icy needles. She had no coat. She had no weapon. She had no pack. Sirae Vance, discarded and shattered, stumbled into the white wasteland of Blackwood National Forest, welcoming the numbness creeping over her skin. The cold felt merciful. It was the only thing that could match the frozen crater where her heart used to be. The world blurred into swirling gray and white. The wind didn't just blow. It screamed a piercing shriek that mocked her with every breath. Her thin dress, the one she had mended for hours to wear tonight, soaked through instantly. The cold sank its claws into her, a living beast, tearing at her flesh and settling deep into her bones. She didn't run. She simply kept walking, step after step. "I, Voren Thorn, reject you." The words echoed louder than the storm. She is weak. She is small. Snow climbed to her shins. Each movement felt like dragging cement. Her wolf, that faint gray flicker inside her, tried to offer strength, but it was like trying to spark a flame with a single wet match. Omegas weren't made for this. They were built for hearth fires, nurseries, warm hands, not blizzards that devoured everything. She tripped over a buried root and fell face first into a drift. The snow felt soft, almost tender. It would be so easy to stop, to close her eyes and let the cold swallow her whole. She will bear no strong sons. Tears froze on her lashes, tiny crystals of hurt. Why had Lyroon done this? Why tie her fate to someone like Voren? Someone who saw her as nothing but a stain on his ambition. It was cruel. Her entire life had been a cruel joke. She remembered the other pups yanking her hair and spitting Omega trash. She remembered warriors returning from hunts and forgetting to leave her food. She remembered the sneers of she-wolves as she scrubbed floors until her hands bled. And now Voren, his betrayal, was the final blade. She pushed herself up, not out of hope, but out of a sharp, stubborn anger she had never felt before. She would not die here, not steps away from the hall where they were still laughing about her. She would not give them the satisfaction of finding her frozen corpse in the morning. She would walk. She would walk until Blackwood Forest swallowed her for good. She trudged on for what felt like hours. The blizzard deepened the frost wind, living up to every nightmare whispered by the elders. Visibility vanished. Trees appeared only when she nearly crashed into them, dark giants in a world of white. Her body stopped shivering altogether. Her muscles locked. Hypothermia sinking its teeth in. This is it, she thought, a strange peace settling over her. It's finally over. She leaned against the massive trunk of an old pine, the bark rough against her cheek. Her legs gave way, sliding her down into the deep snow. The world quieted. The storm's scream softened to a muffled hum. Her eyelids felt impossibly heavy. Just one moment of rest. She drifted, sinking into a comforting, cold sleep. No pain, no shame. The rejection felt distant now. Only whiteness remained. Quiet. Gentle. And then she heard it. Not a pack howl. Not a challenge. Something entirely different. A sound she had never heard yet recognized instinctively. A howl of raw, undiluted agony. It tore through the storm like a blade, deep, powerful, breaking apart at the end, like something dying. A creature in its final moments, a king gasping his last breath. Sirae's eyes snapped open, the numbness shattered, replaced by a sudden spike of adrenaline that burned like fire. Her Omega nature, the part Voren hated most, surged to the front. It wasn't a thought. It was instinct. Someone's hurt. Someone's dying. Someone needs help. The howl rose again, quieter this time, ending in a strangled whine. It was close, maybe 100 yards to her left, deeper in the forest. It's a wolf, her rational mind warned a predator. It could be a trap. It could be the end of her. It's hurting. Her Omega heart screamed back. She had nothing left, no pack, no mate, no reason to keep breathing. But this was something she couldn't ignore. It was the one instinct she still had left, to nurture, to heal, to help. Sirae Vance, the rejected Omega who had been ready to surrender to the storm, forced herself upright. She turned away from the quiet promise of death and plunged deeper into the blizzard, chasing the echo of a pain worse than her own. The snow was thicker here, untouched by pack patrols. Drifts swallowed her waist, dragging her down until her palms split open from clawing her way out. The cold became an enemy again, crushing and merciless. But the memory of that howl tugged her onward like a lifeline. She followed sound and instinct alone, shoving through walls of pine that whipped her skin and shredded her already ruined dress. The world was nothing but white chaos, and she was a tiny, stubborn shadow fighting through it. She nearly missed it, a splash of deep red against the blinding snow. Sirae froze breath, locking in her chest. Just ahead, half buried by the storm, was a clearing. In its center lay a scene carved from brutality. A wolf, but not just any wolf. The largest she had ever seen. A creature the size of a small horse draped in a breathtaking coat of brilliant white. A beast out of legend. And he was dying. His left hind leg was destroyed inside a brutal, iron-toothed trap hexen work, but not an ordinary one. The metal wasn't just steel. It was fused with silver, glowing faintly with a sick light against the snow. The silver burned him alive, sizzling into his flesh and sending coils of harsh, poisonous smoke into the freezing air. His breaths were shallow. His massive head lay heavy on the snow, his sides rising and falling in uneven trembling waves. The blood beneath him spread wider and wider, a terrible crimson bloom in a world of white. As she sank to her knees, he lifted his head, sensing her. A low, savage growl rolled from his chest. A sound meant to send prey fleeing. A warning from an alpha of alphas. But Sirae didn't move. She saw beyond the threat. She saw the raw desperation in his eyes not gold like her pack's, but a piercing, intelligent ice blue, eyes that held an ocean of agony and an unbreakable pride. "I'm not here to hurt you," she stammered, her voice whipped away by the wind. The massive wolf exhaled, hard steam bursting from his nostrils. Instinct drove him to lunge, to free himself, but the moment he pulled the silver bit deeper, he released a sharp, broken yelp. "Shh." Sirae breathed, her Omega instincts taking full control. She dropped to her knees and crawled toward him. Her hands were outstretched, palms up. "It's okay. I'm just an Omega. I'm just Sirae. I want to help." The wolf growled again, but weaker now. He watched her carefully, blue eyes locked on hers, measuring, analyzing. He was at her mercy, and he knew it. So did she. She reached the edge of the blood-soaked snow. The stench of burning silver and infection twisted her stomach. "The trap," she whispered to herself. "I have to get it off." She'd seen traps like this before. Illegal. Silver-laced meant declaration of war. She recognized the mechanism. "This is going to hurt," she murmured, voice shaking. "I'm so sorry." She inched closer despite his rumbling warning. She was within reach of his jaws now. One snap could take her arm or her life. She inhaled sharply cold air, slicing her lungs, and placed her numb, frozen hands on the frigid metal. The instant she touched the silver-laced steel, the wolf roared. Not a howl, an explosion of agony. He snapped at her teeth, cracking shut just inches from her face. Sirae cried out, falling backward into the snow. But she didn't flee. "I'm sorry," she sobbed, tears freezing on her cheeks. "I'm sorry, but you have to let me. Please. It's the only way." The wolf's massive body trembled, whether from cold blood loss or sheer effort not to kill her, she couldn't tell. His gaze stayed locked on hers. She crawled forward again, slower this time, breath coming in painful shivers. "Please," she begged, voice breaking. "I know it hurts. Let me help you." She reached for the trap again. He rumbled a warning deep in his chest, but he didn't snap. His ice-blue eyes locked onto hers, a silent, agonizing pact forming between them. "Do it!" That's what his gaze seemed to say. Drawing on every bit of strength left in her battered body, Sirae gripped the trap's two frozen levers. The silver scorched her even through numb skin, but the pain was nothing compared to the raw ache still lodged in her chest. She leaned her weight into it, pushing down hard, fighting the frozen mechanism. "Come on," she grunted, muscles burning. The trap groaned under the strain. The massive wolf released a sharp, high-pitched whine, a sound that tore through the storm. And then with a brutal metallic snap, the iron jaws flew open. The wolf was free. He immediately collapsed, his mangled leg folding at a crooked angle that made Sirae's stomach twist. His panting deepened eyes fluttering shut. "No," she whispered urgently. "No, don't die. Not now." He was bleeding fast. A few yards away, a rocky outcrop formed a shallow cave, barely a dent in the stone, but still shelter. "We have to move," she said, grabbing fistfuls of his thick fur. "Come on. You have to help me." She pulled. He didn't budge, a dead weight of muscle and blood. "Please." She choked out tears freezing on her lashes. "Get up." The great white wolf opened his eyes. He looked at her, this tiny shaking scrap of a girl who had just pulled him out of death's teeth. He saw the desperation clinging to her. With a low, ancient groan that seemed to rise from the earth itself, he pushed up on his three good legs, trembling violently. He leaned heavy against her shoulder. Together, a rejected Omega and a dying Alpha King, they staggered toward the cave. They collapsed inside just as the last hint of daylight vanished. Sirae, drained of every ounce of strength, slumped against his massive, overheated body. He was burning with fever, his fur scorching under her fingertips, but it was the only warmth she had. With a shuddering breath, he shifted, curling his huge frame around her smaller one, pulling her tight to his chest. Two exhausted souls in the snow clinging to each other, while the frost-wind blizzard screamed outside. Sirae woke to two conflicting sensations, warmth and agony. The warmth startled her. It wrapped around her like a heavy breathing blanket, smelling of pine snow and a sharp electric note of power. The agony was familiar, her skin and muscles screaming from everything she'd pushed past. Her hands felt like they were on fire, burned raw from the silver. She opened her eyes. It was still dark, but the blizzard had softened to a steady, angry wind. The cave was barely a slice in the rock, just enough to shield them. And the white wolf was gone. In his place lay a man. Sirae gasped and scrambled backward, heart slamming against her ribs. He lay exactly where the wolf had been, his body curled protectively in the same shape. He was naked, skin pale in the dimness, built like something carved out of myth. Broad shoulders, a chest roped with muscle even in unconsciousness. His long hair spilled around him in tangled waves of moonlit white streaked with blood and melting snow. He was the wolf. He had shifted. His left leg was a wreck, the wound from the trap, a vicious blackened burn, leaking dark blood. The silver's poison was spreading fast. He groaned, face tightening in pain. His eyes, the same piercing ice blue, opened slowly. Fever glazed them, unfocused. Rear. Rear. He mumbled, voice rough and broken. It's cold. Sirae's fear dissolved instantly, replaced by the same unstoppable wave of instinct that had driven her through the storm. He was delirious. The silver was killing him. I'm not Rear, she said softly, voice raw. I'm Sirae. You're safe. We're in a cave. He blinked slowly, trying to focus. Sirae, he repeated, testing the name through cracked lips. He shivered violently, a full-body tremor that rattled his bones. He's going to die, she realized, the panic surging. He'll freeze before the poison even finishes him. She looked down at her shredded dress, then back at him. There was no real choice. I'm sorry, she whispered. She tore a long, thick strip from the hem of her ruined skirt. The cloth was stiff with frost, but it was all she had. I need to clean the wound. Packing snow into the fabric, she began gently dabbing around the burn. The man hissed, muscles tightening, but he didn't pull away. The snow deadened the area around the wound, and she used her nails to scrape away the blackened, sizzling flesh. It was crude, brutal field surgery, but she knew if the silver poison tissue stayed, it would spread like wildfire. Who did this to you? She asked, her voice trembling as she worked. Hexen, he rasped after a long stretch of harsh breathing. Border jumpers. He gritted his teeth. Cowards. They use silver. Think it makes them strong. She finished as best she could, tying another strip of her torn dress tightly around the wound. It was pitiful, barely a bandage, but it was all she had. His trembling grew worse. His teeth chattered uncontrollably. Sirae didn't hesitate. She lay down beside him, fitting her small frame into the curve of his like he had done for her in his wolf form. She pressed herself against his back, wrapping her arms around his torso, trying to force her meager heat into him. His skin was like frozen stone. It's not enough, she muttered. She shifted around to face him, more intimate, more dangerous. She was wrapped around a strange naked alpha who could break her spine with a twitch. But the Omega in her recognized only one thing: her patient was dying. She pressed her chest to his, her legs tangling with his. She set her cold, burned hands on his cheeks, rubbing gently. Stay with me, she pleaded. Don't go to sleep. Talk to me. Tell me your name. He looked at her. The blue of his eyes had sharpened, focused. He saw her, a tiny dirt-smudged girl with kindness where others had only found fault. Draycen, he whispered. My name is Draycen. Draycen, she repeated softly. Well, Draycen, you're not dying on my watch. I didn't drag your giant furry backside in here just for you to give up. A faint, nearly invisible smile touched his lips. You're bossy. For an Omega. Sirae stiffened. How did you... I can smell it, he murmured, eyes drooping. Your rank, your fear, and your rejection. It's thick on you, like old blood. Shame punched cold through her chest. She started to pull away, but his hands, surprisingly strong despite the fever, shot out and clamped around her wrist. Don't, he commanded. The single word vibrated with such authority that she froze. Don't go. It's warm. She settled back against him, heart pounding. He was right. Inch by inch, their shared heat carved out a small pocket of warmth in the frozen cave. They stayed like that for days. The blizzard raged, sealing them into their rocky shelter. Time blurred into a strange hidden existence. Sirae, with the herbal training every Omega girl received, proved unexpectedly resourceful. She ventured into the storm's brief pauses to gather pine needles, steeping them in melted snow to make a weak, bitter tea to fight his fever. She found a patch of wintercrest and made him chew it. He, in return, offered his body heat and fragments of his story. Draycen, she asked on the second day, as he shivered through another fever wave, his head resting in her lap while she changed the dressing. Where's your pack? Why are you alone? I was scouting, he mumbled. Got separated. My pack is north. Far north. They probably think I'm dead. They'll come for you, she said, trying to sound confident. He looked up at her. And yours, the one that rejected you. Will they come for you? Sirae's hands stilled. No. They're celebrating. They're glad I'm gone. She told him everything. The ceremony Voren Ellis, the years of being invisible, being Omega, trash. The words spilled out in the intimate blackness of the cave, a confession she'd never have dared whisper in daylight. Draycen listened. He didn't say empty reassurances. He didn't tell her it would be fine. He just listened. His ice-blue eyes darkened with a cold, simmering fury she mistook for sympathy. He called you weak, Draycen, said, voice a low growl. I am, Sirae whispered. I'm an Omega. No. Draycen's voice sharpened like a blade. He pushed himself up on one elbow, ignoring the searing pain in his leg, and grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. His eyes were no longer glazed with fever. They were clear, fierce, alive. You walked into a blizzard with no coat and no hope. You heard a wolf dying, and instead of running, you walked toward it. You put your bare hands on a silver trap that was burning through your skin. You faced down an alpha who could have ripped your throat out. You've sat here for 2 days, keeping me alive with nothing but snowweeds and sheer stubborn will. He was so close she could feel the heat of him, the raw power barely contained beneath his skin. Sirae, he said, his voice gentling, you are the furthest thing from weak I've ever seen. Something inside her, something Voren had shattered, began to knit itself back together. It wasn't a fated bond. It was something earned, something built from grit and survival. Draycen leaned in, and for a heartbeat she thought he would kiss her. Her breath caught, but instead, he pressed his forehead to hers. Thank you, he whispered. The blizzard finally broke on the 4th day. Sunlight speared into the cave, bright and blinding, revealing their tiny shelter. Draycen, finally strong enough to stand, moved toward the entrance. He was still magnificent, and still naked. Sirae quickly looked away, heat flaring in her cheeks. He laughed low and rich. My pack is just north of this ridge, he said, pointing. The Winter Fang Mountains. It's a day's walk. Come with me. Sirae blinked. Go with you, Draycen. I'm a rejected Omega. Your pack. His expression hardened instantly. My pack will treat you as what you are, my savior. You will be honored. Sirae Vance. You'll have warm clothes, real food, and the respect you've always deserved. He held out his hand. I have influence. I won't let anyone lay a hand on you. No one will ever call you Omega trash again. She stared at his hand, then at the forest, stretching back toward Blood Moon Ridge. There was nothing for her there except pain, humiliation, and the echoes of laughter at her ruin. Here stood a man who saw her. She placed her small, scarred hand into his larger, calloused one. Okay, she said softly, I'll go. The trek was brutal. Snowdrifts swallowed their legs. Draycen, despite his pride, was still gravely injured, his leg a constant knife of pain. He leaned on Sirae heavily, using her as a makeshift crutch. She, in turn, drew strength from his relentless determination. His will was a force of nature. They moved slowly, pausing often. He taught her how to walk atop snow crusts, how to find parts of the forest where the canopy kept the drift shallow. She pointed out edible roots he missed. A king and an Omega, 2 broken pieces, learning how to fit together out of necessity. We're almost at the pass, Draycen said, voice tight with pain. They'd been walking for hours, the sun dipping low, staining the snow with orange and blood-red light. Once we cross the ridge, we'll be in Winterfang territory. My wolves will find us. Sirae nodded, even as her own muscles screamed. I can make it. They were halfway across a frozen stream when he suddenly stopped, his head lifted, nostrils flaring. A low growl rolled through him. What is it? Sirae whispered, gripping the small, sharp rock she'd picked up. Company, he snarled. Blood moon. I smell their filth. Before Sirae could react, they burst from the trees. Voren. With him were two familiar warriors, Calyx and Bront. All three were in wolf form, a dark brown, a timber gray, and a mottled black. They shifted as they hit the clearing, their steaming forms rising from the snow. Unlike Draycen, they scrambled to pull on the trousers and boots tied at their waists. Voren stepped forward wearing the same cruel, satisfied smirk she once mistook for charm. "Well, well," he drawled, eyes dragging over Sirae. "Look what we found. The little Omega whore. You really thought you could run Alpha Rathor is furious. You've shamed the pack." Sirae instinctively stepped in front of Draycen, shielding him. "Leave us alone, Voren." He laughed sharp and mocking. "Leave you alone. You're pack property." His gaze slid to Draycen. "And what's this?" "You found yourself a stray, a crippled one at that." "He's under my protection," Sirae said, voice shaking, but steady. Voren's friends barked laughter. "You can't even protect yourself," Calyx sneered. "He's right, Sirae," Draycen murmured, voice dangerously calm. "Get behind me." Draycen. "You can't," she whispered. "Your leg, behind me." The authority in his voice was absolute. Sirae hesitated only a second, then obeyed. Draycen pushed away from the tree, straightening to his full height. He was taller than Voren, broader too, and even wounded. The aura rolling off him made the three Blood Moon warriors instinctively shift back. "You are Voren," Thorn Draycen said. It wasn't a question. "And you're dead." Voren spat through. The edge of his bravado had begun to crack. "You've trespassed on our land and tainted our Omega. We're taking her back for judgment, and we're taking your head as a trophy." "You will do neither," Draycen replied. "3 against 1 cripple." Calyx snarled, shifting his stance. "You're right," Draycen said calmly. He glanced at Sirae. "When I say run, you run to the ridge. Don't look back." "I won't leave you," she breathed. That, Draycen said, eyes locked on Voren, was an order. It happened in a blur. Voren lunged, shifting midair into his massive brown, wolf form claws ready to tear. Draycen didn't shift. He simply moved fast enough to defy the injury, tearing at his leg. He sidestepped the attack, grabbed Voren's wolf form by the scruff, and hurled him into a snowbank. Calyx and Bront attacked from both sides. Draycen took a claw across the arm, the wound ripping open, but he didn't even flinch. Instead, he crushed his fist into Calyx's snout and kicked Bront square in the chest, sending him sliding across the ice. It was a masterclass in controlled violence. He was wounded, outnumbered, still in human form, and somehow winning. Every move turned their own weight and momentum against them. "Run, Sirae. Now." Draycen roared as Voren scrambled upright, fur bristling, ready to charge again. Sirae spun to run, but her legs wouldn't move. Fear froze her to the spot. Voren wasn't going for Draycen. He was lunging for her. She heard the echo of his voice. "She is weak. She is small." Something inside Sirae snapped, something primal, fierce and long buried. "No," she screamed, the sound ripping from her throat. As Voren's wolf form lunged, jaws open to snap her neck, Sirae didn't flee. She surged forward. The sharp rock clutched in her fist slashed downward, burying itself deep into his shoulder. Voren howled in agony, stumbling, but the strike left her completely exposed. Bront, patched black fur and hungry eyes, saw his chance. He sprang over the fallen Voren, jaws aimed at Sirae's throat. This is it, she thought as she shut her eyes. A blur of white and black slammed into Bront, smashing him sideways into a tree. Sirae's eyes flew open. The clearing was suddenly crawling with wolves. Not Blood Moon wolves. These wolves were enormous, pitch black, their eyes glowing silver. They wore articulated armor of leather and metal. At their center stood a man who had just shifted, tall, severe features, a scar cutting from temple to jaw, clad in black, fur-lined armor. He surveyed the scene: Voren, bleeding calyx, cowering, Bront, stumbling to rise, Sirae trembling and bloodstained, and Draycen leaning against a tree, wounded but composed, gaze like sharpened ice. Then the scarred man dropped to one knee. Every armored wolf immediately followed, bowing low. "My king," the scarred man said, voice, a deep, reverent baritone, "forgive our delay. The blizzard masked your scent." Sirae's world tilted violently. "My king!" Silence fell, broken only by the drip of blood and her ragged breathing. Voren, now back in human form, clutching his bleeding shoulder, stared in shock. His face emptied of rage, replaced by stark, bone-deep terror. Sirae looked from the kneeling warrior to Draycen. Draycen was no longer leaning. He stood tall, too tall, his posture shifting from wounded survivor to something vast and formidable. The gentle, quietly spoken man from the cave was gone. In his place stood a figure of absolute authority, a presence that crackled in the air like storm lightning. A king. And everyone felt it. "Commander Rydar," Draycen said, his voice no longer the ragged rasp of a dying man, but a crisp, commanding tone that allowed no argument. "You arrived just in time." "Your Majesty," Rydar replied, his sharp eyes flicking toward the 3 blood moon wolves. "What are your orders, Draycen?" Sirae whispered, his name a question, a plea. What is this?" He turned to her, and, for the briefest heartbeat, those ice-blue eyes softened. The king vanished, replaced by the man from the cave, the one who had bled in her arms. "It's all right, Sirae," he murmured. "You're safe." Then he faced Rydar again, and the crown, unseen but unmistakable, returned. "These children are from Blood Moon Ridge," he said coldly. "They ambushed me and my companion. They have aided Hexen. The trap I was caught in was theirs, and they attacked a sworn member of the royal conclave." Voren made a choking, panicked sound. No, we didn't know. We thought he was a stray, a poacher, Draycen." No, the king stalked toward him. He didn't limp. He moved with the effortless, terrifying fluidity of a predator. Pain forgotten. Strength absolute. He stopped before Voren, towering over the kneeling Beta. "You didn't know," the king echoed, voice dropping into a deadly purr. "You saw an outnumbered man wounded, and you attacked. You saw a lone, rejected she-wolf, and you hunted her." He crouched, bringing his face eye to eye with the male who had shattered Sirae's life. "You are Voren Thorn." "Yes, your Majesty." Voren sobbed, tears freezing on his cheeks. "You are the male who rejected Sirae Vance." It wasn't a question. It was a verdict. She was just an Omega." Voren stammered. I had the right." "It's pack law. It is not the law of Liroon," the king snarled, voice dropping into a growl that made the trees tremble. "You annihilated a sacred bond out of arrogance and pride. You abandoned a pack sister to a killing storm. And then," his voice became ice, "you hunted my savior for sport." The king rose to his full height, the air crackling with power. "Rydar, bind them, all 3. They will be taken to Winterfang Keep for judgment, and send a summons to Alpha Rathor of Blood Moon Ridge." "Yes, your Majesty," Rydar replied. He and the armored warriors moved with deadly precision, binding the 3 terrified Blood Moon wolves. Voren's wild, desperate gaze shot to Sirae. "Sirae, please tell him. Tell him. It was a mistake, a misunderstanding. We were fated." Sirae just stared at him, her mind a numb, turning storm. The male who destroyed her now begged her to save him. The king stepped between them, blocking Voren from her sight. He took her arm gently, shockingly gentle, compared to the power rolling off him. "Sirae," he said softly, a voice only meant for her. She looked up at the man she had fed, warmed, carried, and saved. Who are you?" she whispered. He gave her a tired, bittersweet smile. "My name is Draycen Volkov," he answered. "Alpha King of the Winterfang Dominion and ruler of all northern packs." He exhaled. "Draycen was a nickname from my brother. I haven't used it in a long time." Sirae's legs buckled. The king caught her before she hit the snow, lifting her with ease. Rydar Draycen commanded a cloak for Lady Sirae, the good one. A warrior rushed forward, draping a heavy cloak lined with white wool over her shoulders. She sank into it, warmth pine and Draycen's scent enveloping her. "Your Majesty, your leg," Rydar said, noticing the blood. "It will hold, Draycen," said, adjusting Sirae in his arms. "Let's go home." He began walking toward the ridge, carrying her as if she weighed nothing. The entire retinue of armored wolves followed a silent, lethal escort. Sirae glanced back over Draycen's shoulder. The last thing she saw was Voren Thorn's face, white with horror, as he was dragged away by the king's guard. She was no longer Sirae, the rejected Omega. She was Sirae, savior of the king. And she had no idea what that meant. Winterfang Keep was not a pack house. It was a fortress carved into the mountain, a masterpiece of gray stone and black timber that seemed to defy gravity, its towers piercing the clouds. Hundreds of shifters, warriors and armor servants in livery, nobles in heavy furs moved through its courtyards like shadows, and they all smelled like pack. His pack. Draycen's pack. When the king strode into the great hall still carrying Sirae in his arms, the entire fortress fell into a stunned hush. 100 pairs of eyes snapped toward her, the strange blood-stained woman held against their king's chest. Draycen didn't slow. "A medical team. To my chambers now," he commanded, his voice booming through the stone hall. "And summon Lady Valana. She will tend to our guest." He carried Sirae up a spiraling staircase, down a corridor hung with ancient tapestries, and shouldered open a set of massive oak doors into a room large enough to rival the Blood Moon Pack Hall. A fire roared in a hearth big enough for a man to stand inside. The bed was a mountain of furs. He set her gently onto a velvet chaise near the fire. "You're safe now," he said, kneeling before her. A team rushed in, a healer in robes among them. Solmert Draycen called sharply, "See to my leg later. Her injuries first. Her hands are burned." Before Sirae could object, a silver-haired woman, Lady Valana, knelt by her side. "Oh, sweetheart," Valana murmured as she unwrapped the makeshift bandages. The burns were raw and angry. She smoothed a cool, sweet-scented salve over Sirae's palms, and the pain eased instantly. Across the room, Draycen was being tended to as well, though he hardly looked like a patient. He issued orders with crisp authority: double the patrols, find the Hexen camp, alert the Silver Moon and Stonecrest Alphas, and bring me a full report on Blood Moon's Alpha by morning. This was the same man she had begged to eat roots in a cave, the same man she had wrapped herself around for warmth. The absurdity made a weak, helpless laugh bubble in her chest. When the healers finally finished, Draycen dismissed everyone, including the sour-faced Solmire. Then it was just the two of them in the enormous firelit chamber. Draycen sat across from her, the silence between them heavy with unspoken truths. He was no longer the quiet, wounded wanderer. He was the Alpha King. "Sirae," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology for what," she asked in a small voice. "For not being a stray, for being a king, for the deception," he admitted, meeting her gaze. "When I scout the borders for Hexen, I use the name Draycen. It lets me move unseen. If they knew the king was nearby, they would have set more than one trap." "I understand," she whispered. "I was in wolf form when I was caught." He continued, staring into the fire. "I fought until I had nothing left. The silver. It drains us. By the time you found me, I was barely conscious. And in the cave you were terrified, heartbroken. If I had told you who I was, you would have run. He motioned to the chamber around them. The guards, the opulence, the weight of his crown. Or you would have treated me like this. Then his voice softened, taking on that intimate warmth she remembered from the cave. But you didn't see a king. You saw a wounded man. You helped him. You didn't care about rank. You didn't care about power. You just cared. He exhaled. I haven't known that kind of selflessness in a very long time. Sirae looked down at her newly bandaged hands. I'm just an Omega Draycen. It's what I do. No, he said firmly as he sat beside her. He took her hands in his touch gentle, reverent. It's who you are. And they threw it away. Voren, your alpha, your entire pack blind fools. They had a diamond, and they tossed it into the mud. Silence settled between them, broken only by the crackling fire. Sirae was warm, safe, clean. Valana had given her a soft wool dress, but Sirae had never felt more adrift in her life. What happens now? She whispered. To me, am I a prisoner here? Draycen looked genuinely shocked. A prisoner, he echoed. Sirae, you are the king's honored guest. You are a hero to this kingdom. You saved my life. You can have anything, anything at all. A fresh start in the capital, training rank, purpose. She shook her head as a tear slid down her cheek. I don't want any of that. I don't know what I want. I don't know where I belong. Draycen's expression softened into something warm, something almost tender. I know this is overwhelming. Draycen rose and walked toward the balcony, pushing open the double doors. A rush of crisp mountain air swept into the chamber. Here the stars burned brighter, so close they felt touchable. Come, he said. Sirae joined him at the stone railing. The Winterfang dominion stretched below them, an entire valley glittering with torchlight under a vast star-washed sky. You belong, Draycen said quietly, not looking at her. Where you are respected, where you are cherished. Then he turned to her. Sirae Vance, when Voren rejected you, he severed your fated bond. Liroon saw it. His hands lifted hers, bandaged, trembling. The goddess does not make mistakes, but she does correct them. When a fated bond is broken by cruelty, it frees the soul. Frees it to find the one it was truly meant for. Sirae's heart pounded so violently, she thought her ribs might crack. Draycen, what are you saying? I'm saying. He breathed, voice thick with an emotion she didn't have a name for that. In that cave when I was just Draycen, and you were just Sirae, something shifted. He exhaled slowly. I felt a pull, a connection. I have never felt with another living soul. It wasn't the fever. He looked up at the full moon, bright and cold above them. I think Sirae, he said, turning back to her with those piercing ice-blue eyes, that Voren didn't just reject his Omega. I think he rejected my fated queen. A new bond. A new scent. Soft, quiet, powerful. Not the agonizing pull she'd endured with Voren. This felt deep, steady, like home. He set you free, Draycen whispered, brushing her cheek with his fingertips. And you followed a howl in the blizzard. Straight to me. 1 week later, the great hall of Winterfang Keep was full to bursting. This was not a celebration. It was judgment. Alpha Rathor of Blood Moon Ridge stood in the center of the hall, his face ashen. Ellis stood beside him, trembling. Voren Calyx and Bront sat in chains before the throne, and on the 2 thrones at the front of the hall sat King Draycen Volkov, and beside him, Sirae Vance. She was unrecognizable from the woman she'd been a week ago. Valana had worked miracles. Sirae wore the deep blues and silver of the Winterfang pack. Her hair shone. Her hands, though scarred, were strong. But her eyes, the fear was gone. Alpha Rathor Draycen, began, voice echoing across the stone hall. You were summoned to answer for your pack. I was found on your land, caught in a silver-laced hexen trap. Your beta and his warriors attacked me. Explain." Rathor bowed so deeply, his forehead nearly touched the floor. "Your Majesty, I had no knowledge. We were hunting the hexen and Voren. He acted without my blessing. Punish him not, Blood Moon. We are loyal." Draycen looked at Voren. "You claim you were hunting a runaway Omega. You claim she shamed your pack. Look at her, Voren." Forced Voren lifted his head. He saw Sirae sitting beside the king, and his mind cracked. "No," he rasped. "No, no, that's impossible. You're Omega trash. You're nothing. She's my fated mate." Draycen's snarl shook the hall. His Alpha King aura erupted, slamming every wolf Rathor included to their knees. "She is the future lunar queen of the Winterfang Dominion." Draycen thundered, "And you scorned her." Gasps echoed across the hall. Rathor looked ready to faint. Ellis turned white and collapsed. "You," Draycen said, pointing at Voren, "have committed treason against the crown and blasphemy against Lirun. The punishment is death." "No," Voren screamed, chains rattling. "Please, Sirae. Sirae, save me. Remember our bond." "I was wrong. I'll do anything. Be your servant, please." Draycen raised his hand. Guards stepped forward to drag Voren away. "Wait!" Sirae's voice cut through the hall like a blade. The voice was soft, but it sliced through the throne room like a blade. It was Sirae. She rose from her throne and descended the steps, her silver gown whispering across the stone. She stopped right in front of Voren. He scrambled to his knees, shoving his head against her feet. "My lunar. My queen. Have mercy," he sobbed. Sirae looked down at the male who had shattered her heart, who had called her worthless, who had left her to die in a blizzard. She felt nothing. No rage, no grief, but pity. "You were right about one thing, Voren," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I am an Omega. My nature isn't to destroy, it's to nurture." She glanced briefly at Draycen, who watched her with unguarded pride. "My pack is not a pack of bullies or arrogant fools," she continued. "My pack is honorable, strong." Her gaze hardened. "You do not belong in it." She turned to Draycen. "I do not want his death," she said. "Death is an escape." Then she faced Voren again. "You called me weak. You said I was nothing, that I wasn't enough." Her eyes flashed. "You are driven only by pride, so I will take your pride." Gasps rippled through the hall. "You will be stripped of your rank," she declared, "and of your wolf." The hall erupted, shocked whispers, terrified cries. To have one's wolf forcibly locked away was a punishment worse than death. "You will live your life as a human," Sirae said, her voice cold and final. "In human lands. You will never feel the moon's call nor the warmth of a pack again. You are banished. You are nothing to us." Voren stared up at her, horror flooding his face. Sirae turned and walked back toward the throne. She placed her hand in Draycen's. "As for Blood Moon Ridge," Draycen announced, "your Alpha has failed in his duty. He will step down. Blood Moon Ridge will be absorbed under direct protection of the Winterfang Dominion. Commander Rydar will oversee it until a worthy Alpha is chosen." Rathor fell to his knees, shaking, but he nodded. It was mercy far more than he deserved. That night Sirae stood on the balcony beside Draycen, watching snow drift across their new kingdom. "You were magnificent," he murmured, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her back against his chest. "I was just being an Omega," she whispered, resting her head on his shoulder. "You were being a queen," he corrected softly, kissing her hair. "My queen." She had entered the blizzard to die, rejected, broken, alone. She had followed a Howl, only because her heart still knew how to be kind. And in her darkest moment she had found her true fate. Not as Sirae, the Omega trash, but as Sirae Volkov, the Omega queen. The rejected Omega, who'd been told she was worthless, had discovered that her greatest weakness, her compassion, was her greatest strength. It saved a king, and it saved her. Sirae's story is a reminder your worth isn't defined by those who reject you, but by the choices you make when you have nothing left to lose. If you loved Sirae and Draycen's journey, if you believe in second chances, show your support. Your engagement keeps these stories alive. Hit that like button. If you're glad Voren got what he deserved, share this with another lover of twist drama and fated love. And most importantly, subscribe and ring that bell. You won't want to miss the next story waiting for you. Thank you for listening.